morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our session today. My name is Richard Piasentin. I'm the Chief Strategy and Chief Marketing Officer for Accedian, and I'm excited to overview for you some of the opportunities and the associated complexities of deploying private 5G networks in manufacturing and industrial 4.0 applications. Excuse me as I attempt to make the Zoom recording work. I'm going to start my screen share. And I hope everyone will appreciate somewhat the irony of the Minds and the Gaps title for today's presentation. As one of our clients, Goya Foods, who I'll be mentioning later on today, put it, the opportunities and the technologies available to CIOs in manufacturing and retail environments today is a really, really exciting landscape if you're a technologist. But by the same token, it brings a tremendous amount of complexity. And the gaps in between the technologies and the deployment options is something that we at Accedian think that we can help our existing clients and new clients like yourselves potentially to optimize end user experience and make the deployment of your 5G technologies as successful as possible. So I don't think I need to tell this group that IT management is becoming more and more complex. The deployment options that have existed historically, we overall have worked through the evolution from virtualization to cloud native deployments to hybrid data centers, massive opportunity associated with cost reduction in the commodity clouds or the public cloud environments. And all the while trying to manage the automation strategies and the environment requirements for your end users for the applications that they count on every day. As the title of this presentation and this topic in general highlights, one of the new technologies and new evolutions that you all are potentially interested in deploying is the use case around deploying a private 5G network. Now, this comes with many options. You have the opportunity of subcontracting the deployment of that private 5G network completely to your telco. You can manage the RAN network, the radio access network on your own, and then subcontract, again, the core network to your telco, or you can choose to take the entire infrastructure inside of your IT operations and manage it end-to-end yourself. One thing to be aware of, that if you are responsible for managing end user experience or application performance experience across a access network technology, I don't think it's exaggerating to say that if you picture the most complex application you have today running in your hybrid infrastructure, whichever application that is for your business that is hardest to keep running to the performance requirements that your users require. If you are also managing a 5G radio access network and the applications or functions that make that network work, it is not an overstatement to say that that is going to be about 10 times as complex as managing the existing infrastructure on a relative basis. I think as you will have heard from many of the conversations and the presentations today, this is a reality, but there are some things that I think can make that experience more effective and seamless for the enterprises around the world that are choosing to deploy these network technologies. They provide tremendous opportunities for what can be done inside of your business, and there are some technologies that we think can help, again, making that experience more seamless. So with the deployment of these 5G private technologies, there is a myriad of applications, and there's been variations on a theme that you have seen around Industry 4.0, Retail 4.0, massive IoT and connected things, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's in the shipping environment, et cetera. The opportunities for connecting things and running high performance applications in edge data centers creates opportunities to accelerate your business, whether that's to reduce cost, optimize competitiveness, or differentiation, that are significant and very, very new. With that, of course, comes a little bit of complexity, and how to attack that complexity really depends on the core application that you want to make available to your business using those private networks. We use this graphic just to really put in a framework the different dimensions of complexity, or the different dimensions of characteristics in a 5G private network that are important to think about when you're thinking around the deployment strategy and your assurance or your performance management strategy associated with it. Obviously, at the top of this triangle, we have ultra reliability and security. These are URLLC compliant services. We're talking 10 millisecond or less round trip delay, also in low latency being a characteristic of that, but also extremely high availability of access and core infrastructure. Probably the most complex use case to assure on a continuous basis. Manufacturing as a service or integrated manufacturing systems that are connected through your 5G private network would fall under that type of category. When we look at just low latency, many of you will be thinking about the deployment of these network technologies for use in augmented reality use cases, as an example. In your manufacturing facilities, your technical workforce, instead of having to carry around massive binders that contain the technical diagrams of the things that they're working on, you use augmented reality systems that are looking at what the technician is trying to do and what the technician sees in real time, and putting relevant information inside of their visual space. Really exciting space, particularly in high-end technology manufacturing, but one that comes with significant performance management and IT challenges. Again, many options in this space, which you will have heard of before. Accedian has a customer, Goya Foods, actually, that manages something in the neighborhood of 100 mission-critical applications, crossing supply chain, ERP, planning and optimization, workforce and manufacturing facility optimization, routing, quality control, business intelligence, reporting. I'm sure that sounds familiar to many of you. Their plant operations as well, from safety, proactive maintenance, compliance, quality assurance, et cetera. They're running a network that has well in excess of 10,000 mission-critical IoT devices that are connected. They operate a hybrid cloud, public multi-cloud environment, and they use wired Wi-Fi and 5G technologies in that manufacturing infrastructure. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details associated, I'm not going to get into all the details associated with what it takes to manage the IT infrastructure associated with that, specific to Goya, but I will give you a quote here that you can see from Subit, the CTO and CIO of Goya Foods. A 1 second delay in any particular scanner, this is just an example, means effectively across all of the use cases a 19-hour hit on efficiency. So you can start to see the economics implications of managing the quality of that IT infrastructure. So an extended private network requires multi-domain visibility, and that is a lot of buzzwords, but what it really boils down to is every manufacturing facility, unless you're building something from the ground up, and if you are, I'm happy for you, but typically what's happening in your IT environments is you are overlaying next gen and latest technology or technologies to improve your business on top of existing infrastructure, which means you'll have traditional dedicated systems that you may have had to bridge into modern networking environments. You'll have traditional virtualized environments in which you're running monolithic applications. And then for the latest deployments, and also when you think about the compute resources that are running your 5G network, those will typically be containerized cloud environments, CNFs, And all of this has to work in harmony. Many of the times when we look at assurance solutions out there in the marketplace, they're really fit for purpose if your entire infrastructure looks like a lab. It's latest and greatest. You know, it's not running at full optimization, has no legacy infrastructure. And so the scope of what you need to deal with is relatively narrow. What we at Accedian believe is that the real world, your world, looks a little bit more complex than that. And your performance management and assurance solution needs to be comprehensive, not only in the capabilities it provides to manage the experience of your applications and your users, but also the scope of infrastructure that can be incorporated in evaluating that performance, which I'll come to in a little bit more detail in a moment. So you've heard me say it already a couple of times, with great opportunity comes great complexity. This is a high-level diagram of a multi-generational networking and infrastructure environment. And then overlaid on top of that, a private wireless network. And please understand, again, running a access network, a radio access network, has extremely complex, very latency sensitive software elements that need to be integrated into your overall IT strategy. So complexity, however, one of the other things before you begin the process of defining, okay, I have this complex environment, how am I going to manage it, is to think a little bit about what are your points of observation, and then also what's the required level of accuracy. And what this chart tries to get across. And if you will remember, I talked about earlier the idea that whatever performance solution you choose to deploy, it has to have in its scope all of the different types of infrastructure that you maintain. It also needs to provide you options to instrument either at an accuracy level that can't be achieved in software only. That's one point, but also it requires you to be able to acquire performance data potentially from parts of your IT infrastructure that don't have the availability to run a software sensor, as an example. Now with Accedian, we have, like many others, we have software sensors for a variety of different functions, both active and passive, layer 2 all the way to layer 7, or synthetic versus passive, depending on what your reference plane is. And they operate at different levels of accuracy and granularity, depending on what's required by the application, the point of interest, and as well, the available infrastructure. And so we provide a host of software sensors that can be deployed wherever you have available compute at points of interest. And then we have hardware acceleration options in the form of low-cost SFPs, it's referred to as NFV compute on this chart, which allow for extremely high accuracy. So the accuracy required, as an example, for a 5G RAN network, and a remote compute environment for us to deploy sensors in. Again, it's important to have a suite of technologies you can take advantage of to address the complexity of your particular deployment. So if we come back to this diagram, the opportunity that is represented by having a system like that is the ability really to instrument at every single point of interest inside of your infrastructure. So not just the private wireless network, but also all of the data centers, be they hybrid, be they public cloud, be they remote sites. You know, if your back end for a particular application is in one site, your front end is in another, you know, another part of the application chain is living in the public cloud, et cetera. With technologies that we bring to the table, you have the opportunity to instrument all of that infrastructure with a common system. Another way of looking at this is a fit-for-purpose performance management system really needs to take into account what's happening in your application space, layer 2 to layer 7, what's happening in your network and infrastructure. But almost as importantly, that same system needs to bring in third-party feeds from different parts of the infrastructure inside of your IT domain. That's really important because one of the key elements to advanced AI-based performance management systems like Accedian's is the ability to correlate end-user experience or application performance at the highest level of the stack to the infrastructure that affected those flows. So being able to ingest in real time all that third-party data, as well as having your own sensor infrastructure, is very, very important in those deployment options. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to cover the difference between managing this kind of infrastructure in the construct of separate screens, but also managing this kind of infrastructure for high-performance applications in a cloud-native environment. So one of the elements that we like to explain, or excuse me, not explain, one of the elements that we provide to our clients is the ability to deal with really the two different faces of modern IT. So the first face of modern IT rather, which looks a lot like the telco challenges historically, is you deploy your infrastructure and then you deploy a system separately that has panes of glass or screens, depending on what metaphor you want to use, that you use to manage the infrastructure. And that's largely separate from the infrastructure and the applications that you're running. It's observing those and it's providing you a pane of glass that gives you the insights you need in order to maintain performance. That's really important. But what is as important in a modern IT environment is the ability to, when you're deploying applications in your IT environment in a DevOps model, your DevOps engineers are going to look for the opportunity to query your performance system and use the performance characteristics that are being experienced in real time in order to change application behavior. I cannot overemphasize this particular point. With a system like Accedian's, you have a platform first that has panes of glass for your IT or your network ops types functions to keep infrastructure and applications running, but it is also a cloud-centric, or excuse me, cloud-native platform that can be integrated into your DevOps application development environment. Super important, something we'd love to speak with any of you at any time about how we do that. I think I will close this talk by just pointing something out, and this came from a conversation with one of my clients. And there's a lot of different tool sets out there. And when we look at the different domains, the lines between different segments, whether it's application performance management, whether it's network and application performance management, whether it's infrastructure management, et cetera, the lines between different segments in assurance systems are becoming increasingly blurry. But one constant remains. If you want to measure true end user and application experience, you can't just count on logs as an example. You have to look at real traffic. You can't only be monitoring only part of the software stack. You need to be looking at the entire stack. Then you can't be just monitoring part of the infrastructure. You've got to look at the real transactions, the real flows between users and functions, and correlate to the real network infrastructure with deep, deep granularity. And you have to do that everywhere. This might be called an inconvenient truth for some of the folks in our industry, not for Accedian. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. And if there is any desire for follow-up, please don't hesitate to send me an email. And we look forward to supporting you in the future. Thank you.